Hey guys, Cucullin here, and today I'm doing something a little bit different. I hope you'll stick through it with me till the end and see what happens. So this is the Draw My Life, the Coup edition. And the coup isn't the coup as in Cucullin. This is the coup as in Orcu, my dog. See, coup comes from the old Irish word meaning hound. And Orcu means golden hound, which he was so named because he's a Labrador Retriever with a golden coat. Orcu is a full pedigree Labrador Retriever. He was born about 2 floors up a small apartment building. It was just high enough that it would be dangerous if he had tried to jump down. And that's exactly what the dumb idiot tried to do every time he got a chance. He started off as a small puppy and obviously didn't have many problems. But as he got bigger, he was big enough that he could have quite happily jumped off the fence, and since they left him locked out there all the time, they were very worried that he was going to end up jumping and killing himself. And so they decided he was too big to be living in their house and they needed to get rid of him. Now I'm sure Orcu loved his owners and he was very loving towards them, but they were not so loving towards him. They were very aggressive with him, very mean, and quite frankly they didn't treat him as they should have been treating a dog. At 9 months old he still didn't know any tricks at all, and he wasn't very disciplined at all. So he was a bit of an idiot. He had discipline issues and problems with just behaviour in general. And that's why those owners decided to put out an ad to see if anybody would want to take Orcu off of their hands. And then a couple showed up who decided they were going to take Orcu home. And they didn't think he was too big or too dumb or useless. They did think he was stupid. He is in fact stupid. But he's still a lovely dog and they wanted to take him home. I'm sure at this point Orcu was terrified, being brought to a completely new area. He had to take a train and a bus to get back to the house. He'd never been to this area before, and suddenly he was being taken inside, and he realised that he wasn't going to be seeing his owners anymore. And so for the first hour or so he was very happy, but after that he was very sad for a week or two. But I'd like to think that changed a bit when Orcu actually came into the house for a little while and got to know the 3 people that were to become his brothers. We were instantly so happy to have him. We'd always wanted a dog. And we were playing with him and taking him to the park, and he really loved playing football and running around, and he was just such a spastic at that young age. He still wasn't well trained. He still barked at the door and tried to jump up and attack it every time anyone rang the doorbell. But we loved him anyway, and he always had a space to sleep at the bottom of our beds. And he really liked that. He hated being kicked out of a bedroom. He loved to sleep at the bottom of someone's bed, and he loved to keep warm at night. And over time, he stopped whimpering at the door as if he wanted to go home and adapted and decided that this was his home. And then he loved it. He was running around with us each day. He was greeting us at the door when we came home. He loved his new family and we loved him. And as times went on, there were plenty of changes that occurred in the house. The baby of the family grew to be as tall as the eldest of the family. The middle of the family grew to be taller than the other 2. And the mother and father slowly drifted apart. And one fateful day, the mother finally left and went to a different country. And furthermore, the older brother decided that he'd have enough of living at home with his parents and wanted to move out on his own. And shortly after, the youngest of the family decided to follow the mother to the other country. And so there were 3 members of the family left. Me, my dad, and Orcu. And I was sad for a time, and I'm sure my dad was very sad for a time. But I got over it, and Orcu kept us happy and kept us together. Because he was just so much fun, and he was always there waiting for us when we were out at work. And I certainly grew up a lot at this time as well. I went from secondary school to college, and then finally out of college and into the real world. And I fumbled around for a long, long time, till I finally got a proper job, kind of as a teacher, in education for young children. And this meant that I was happy and had money and had more opportunities, but it also meant that me and my dad were both out of the house for most of the day. And I'm sure these weren't very happy times for Orcu. Despite the fact that we were seeing him a lot less, we were still playing with him just as much, making sure on the weekends he still got to go to the park, and making sure on the weekdays we took him to the very local green kind of area, of course, so he wasn't just walking around the streets. And every time we got home after a long day of work, he would always be there dashing down the stairs to the door, wagging his tail and trying to jump all over us. That was another thing we could never quite get him out of. Now, as happens to all dogs when they get older, Orku started having problems getting up the stairs. His hips couldn't quite lift the same way that they used to be able to, and his front legs were doing a lot of the work, which caused problems for him. And so what he did a lot was just sit at the bottom of the stairs barking to get our attention, to try and get us to come downstairs and play with him. Of course, this left him feeling very lonely because I was always upstairs on the computer doing my thing, and my dad has always closed the door when he went into a room to make sure the dog couldn't follow him. So he was alone for quite a bit of the day, even while we were at home. And so I started to make sure that if nothing else, at least at the end of the day when he got his final walk of the day, I'd make sure that I'd carried him up to bed, so that he could lay at the bottom of my bed until the morning. And then when he woke up, he could go for a walk with my dad, and then he'd be a bit alone during the day while we were out, and then he'd have his second walk when we got home, so he wasn't really alone as much of the time as he might have been. And he still had the 3 walks a day, which most dogs are quite happy to have. So over time, we started to notice that he was walking slower and slower, and he didn't want to go for walks as much anymore. He was sleeping most of the day, and if you interrupted him while he was sleeping, he tended to ignore you for quite a bit and only come when he really wanted to. And so we stopped taking him to the faraway park on the weekends because he didn't seem to enjoy it anymore. We just took him to the local green area to let him run around for a bit each day. Only for about 10 to 20 minutes twice a day, because he didn't even want to do it 3 times a day anymore. Just at the beginning and the end of the day. And he was still very happy each time we came home. Always made sure to come to the door to come see us. And that brings us to this week, when he was going to turn 14 in June. And he still acted a lot like a puppy. Everybody always thought that he was very young, because he hadn't gotten chubby or put on a bunch of weight like most dogs do, or gotten very broad like they do. And so he still looked very young, and people were always surprised at his age. But I think he felt it more than anyone else, and he wasn't so happy as he used to be. And one day, when we came home from work, we found that he'd chewed through his tail very, very hard, to the point where it was in serious, serious damage. So finally, on the 26th of March, which was a beautifully sunny spring day, I had the day off work and I took Orku to the park to play. And it took us a long time to get there. It probably took us an hour to make what was normally a 20-minute trip to the park. And we stayed there for like a bunch of hours. He walked around, got tired, laid down, walked around again, got tired, laid down again. He chased the stick a few times. He just really enjoyed himself. We didn't have to be anywhere, so we just played all day. And he had bacon and sausages for lunch, and he had a lovely day. Everything was perfect in Orku's little world. And then he got a very good surprise when, at the end of the day, I told him it was time for walkies and put his leash on. And we didn't just walk down to the local park for him to go to the toilet and to sit around. I walked him down to the nearest bus stop and jumped on a bus. And we went to a very strange old building that we'd never been to before. But Orku loved it because there were plenty of dogs inside that were all interested in sniffing him as he was in them. And even though he was bleeding all over the floor, he didn't seem to mind it at all. He was still wagging his tail happily. And as he was getting tired at the end of the day, he was taken into another room, and of course I came with him. And he was very happy because I gave him a big hug. And as I was hugging him, they put a blue needle into his arm and pushed it in. And almost instantly, he went down in my arms. And so Orku fell asleep for the last time. And they gave me a minute with him to say goodbye. And then I paid the money and left the thing and walked home. It was a very long walk home and I barely even felt it. I got home at around 10 p.m. because I went to the park that we often went to, the little green area near my house, to sit for a while and just to think. And so that was Orku's final day. And the last thing I want to end with is just to tell people that it's not just a dog when a dog owner loses a dog. It's their best friend and it's their brother. And so one of the stupidest things you can ever say to them is, why don't you get another one? And sometimes they just don't want to talk about it. And you shouldn't be trying to get them to talk about it. That's stupid. So thank you guys for listening to the Draw My Life of Orku. Thanks, guys. And good night, Orku. I'll never forget you.
Orku, do you want to go for walkies? You want to go for walkies? Okay.